In this final edition of an exclusive interview with Mike Simpson, who is the new Chief Executive of the Foundation for Relief and Reconciliation in the Middle East, I began by asking him to say whether he felt there was a future for the Christians in Iraq after all they've been through. Is there a future for the Christians there as the post-ISIS conflict ends?
I do believe there is. I know that some are very pessimistic. But Christians have been there, I don't think many people realise, for 2,000 years. We're talking about one of the oldest Christian civilizations, and that continuously throughout that period, despite all the different empires and regimes that there have been. So if they've managed to survive all of that before, then I think with God's grace they can survive now. But they'll need a lot of support, and that's why us as their brothers and sisters in the West need to be doing all we can to support them. And when I say all we can, I mean in terms of prayer, in terms of lobbying our government. We're, for example, going to a meeting in early September with the Department for International Development to see what support they can give. Also working with the EU, who are very interested in supporting the Christians in Iraq. Financially as well, of course, where we're able to do that. People can learn more about how they can support the work by either going on our website, that's frrme.org, or other organisations' websites where other organisations are working in Iraq in partnership with us.
Is there a danger, Mike, that ISIS has left a vacuum in the region? Because we've already seen in Iran and Egypt getting behind and supporting the conflict in Syria. So what dangers do you see, particularly in this region?
It's quite shocking that many people say, well, at least under Saddam Hussein there was stability. And that's quite shocking for us in the West, because we know about his use of chemical weapons on the Kurds, for example, and the mass graves and so on and so forth, the torture. And the danger with what is happening now is that more chaos is going to follow. So I'm hoping and praying that the Iraqi government, with support from Western governments, will be able to provide real stability across the whole of Iraq, and it won't kind of fragment and there won't be more kind of insurrection within it.
I mean, many countries, as you are aware, in the Middle East, including Syria and Lebanon and Jordan, have been affected by conflict, leading to the destabilisation of communities and, of course, the thousands of displaced people across the Middle East. So what would you like to see being done? Because your organisation is into reconciliation and working with these communities. So do you think the international community, and particularly our government and governments in the Middle East, are doing enough to help the people there?
It's not easy. By no means is it easy. But I think there's two key requirements at this point. One is that the government, and you have to say it's a democratically elected government in Iraq. It may not be a perfect democracy, may be far from it, but it is a democratically elected government. So we would like to ensure that that government can establish security throughout the country and an equal respect for the rights of all groups, whatever race and whatever religious group or sect or whoever they are. So that's the first priority. And the second one, as I say, is a longer-term thing, but just as important, and that is that the voices of the people of Iraq are heard. And when I say that, I don't just mean that people in the West can hear about what is the reality of living in Iraq or people who fled Iraq, but also Iraqis can hear from each other. So we want to be a tool for that. Free Me would like to be an organization that can facilitate people in Iraq talking to one another, telling their stories to one another between the communities via social media tools, apps, through video, whatever means, as I've mentioned before, art, poetry, etc. So we want to do what we can to facilitate a conversation, really, because it's when you start to hear other people's voices, that is first kind of building block, if you like, to reconciliation.
And lastly, how would you encourage our listeners listening to this interview today, how would you encourage them to pray?
Well, I think, first of all, please pray for the Christian communities of Iraq and the families, and as you've mentioned, the children of Iraq. Pray for their safety. Pray for God's love and compassion to be upon them. Pray for God's grace to be upon them, that they might be blessed in the midst of trauma. So that's to pray for them. And secondly, I think, to pray for the government of Iraq. You know, we're asked, aren't we, to pray for government in our own country. Let us pray for the government of Iraq, whatever its faults and failings are, and pray that there's wisdom at the top, there's sound leadership, strong and effective leadership to prevent further discord and division and insurrection, and in order to establish the rights of people across the country and respect for people of different religions. So those are two twin aims, I think, that I would like people to pray for.
And, of course, if any of our listeners would like to know more about the work that you do, what can they do? What's the best way of contacting you?
Well, if they go onto our website, which is frrme.org, we pronounce it FreeMe, but it's frrme.org. They can sign up to our newsletter quite easily if they click on the relevant links, and they will get lots of useful information. There's a prayer letter they can sign up for as well, and we do a kind of media briefing as well, which enables people to hear about the latest news coming out of the Middle East if they're interested in that.
That was Mike Simpson. For more details, go to www.frrme.org.